before COVID and after COVID. And I'm a father of 4 children, and of course, first of all, a businessman as Secretary General of the Eureka, which was founded in 1954 by the King of Belgium, the King of Spain, the King of Morocco, and the King of Thailand, Bhumibol, who was also an inventor, because the Eureka at that time was the scientific sister of the European community. And I will explain later on, but what I want to say is, as a father of 4 children, I have to find the status and I have to give to them an advice how they can come through this significant time of period with all these question marks. And on the basis of the pandemic, I'm living at Sidonia Castle, 92 kilometers far from Vienna, in a nice park. But in the pandemic last year, it was closed before summertime 65 days. And after summertime, 198 days till this year. And so I was not able to fly to my office in Belgium, to my office in Moscow. And this free time I was investing with my team to write this book, New Economy 3.0. So this is the reason and the opportunity which I have had with additional time to find a status and to replace the book of the early 70s by the Club of Rome, written by Meadow, Limit of Growth. It's not my understanding of the book, but it is the understanding in the meanwhile of the audience. The book was launched in September in Frankfurt among 50 countries and 10 ministers of different countries. And it is right now recognized as the 3rd school of Austrian macroeconomics, but on that I will come back later. So before I was and I am Secretary General of the Eureka, I was investment banker for infrastructure projects and for proprietary technology with my partners in the US. And the time before, I was a managing director of one of the biggest transport and forwarding companies in Europe. But this was related to our family business, and therefore, as a relatively young man, I was in charge to serve as managing director for 35 companies with own sea freight, air freight, container business, and each kind of services in the international transport industry. So to be realistic, I have to say I'm 57 years old. And so in such a period of time, it's possible to do all these things, hopefully always in the right direction. Let's come to the book and to the relevant knowledge inside the book that this time for all of us might be creating an advantage to be familiar with this kind of realities. For me, it's clear where are the priorities of your studies, but I have to say we can speak about environmental politics, about social politics, about healthcare politics, about cultural exchange, about peace, without funds and without the correct economic policy. And before economic theory, it is only theoretical speaking and understanding. Therefore, of course, for each society, the economic aspects are the most important, finally. So the book, as I said, New Economy 3.0, Sustainability, Macroeconomics with Green Rendite. It's covering 9 parts, totally 504 pages. And the 9 parts we can see in this way. If I will take a narrative, take a stone, throw the stone into a lake, and surrounding to the stone, there will be one circle, second circle, concentric circles. Let's say we have 9, but we will start not with the inner circle, we will start with the last circle. And like a deduction, we will go from out to the inner realities. The inner realities are the conclusion for a new economy 3.0. So what you will find in the first part of the book? Of course, the economic theory. And in the economic theory, you have a lot of work and scientific approach since late 18th century. And what I want to try is to make a red line through the book and the different chapters, some of them more interesting, more relevant, other one completely might be artificial for some of you, but only to have an idea and to hear it once. In economic terms, you can start with Adam Smith and with his invisible hand. Afterwards, from Relevance, you have David Ricardo, Max Weber. He is well known for his sentence, "The end justifies the means." Walras. And then we are close to the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century with Karl Marx and his theory. We all know what was the impact of his theory. By the way, he wrote the book Capital in Brussels during his staying there. In the 20th century, it's interesting to recognize that by the end of the Second World War was the Great Bretton Woods Agreement. And 40 years exactly till the early 80s, end of the 70s, you have Keynesianism in the world. And what is the meaning of Keynesianism? I will tell in some sentences later on. With Margaret Thatcher in Great Britain and Ronald Reagan in the United States after Jimmy Carter and the disaster of his administration, was starting the concept of neoliberalism called Reaganomics and Thatcherism. The know-how and background for that was the Chicago School of Economics. And the Chicago School of Economics is based on the second school of Austrian macroeconomics. So you will see that the Austrians were relevant in the past for economic terms and are relevant nowadays. Small country, but creative people. So first, what you should keep in your mind is that till now, or better to say, till 2020, before the pandemic was taking place, as we are all knowing, we were living in a world of neoliberalism, which means less state, more private initiatives, which means privatization, reprivatization. And what is interesting, as I said, 40 years before, it was exactly 40 years Keynesianism. And the meaning of Keynesianism is more state. The state is controlling the economic sector. So in the first part, where we are speaking about the economic theories, now we were entering to the second part about the economic politics as the outcome from the economic theory. And as I said, 40 years Keynesianism with a special case of Austria Keynesianism and 40 years neoliberalism. After these two parts of the book, the third part is the research and the analytics about all axioms of the Nobel Prize winner in the field of macroeconomics. The Nobel Prize were starting early 1901 and only by the end of the 60s, last century, the Nobel Prize for Economics was implemented as an award of the National Bank of Sweden. So all Nobel Prizes were given to the winner in Oslo, Norway, but the Nobel Prize for Economics, the event always will be held in Stockholm, in Sweden. So easy to see, more than 50 years, you have Nobel Prize winner in the field of economics. And what was relevant for us, for me, for my team, for the co-author of the book, and by this possibility, I want to say that the publisher of the book are IM and Maya Hiram Rothschild of the United States. We were searching which of these more than 50 axioms of Nobel Prize winner in the field of economics are relevant for the solutions, for the problems, or better to say, exercises of this generation. Can you imagine? Finally, I have to say, maybe three. And these three are, first of all, Paul Romer. He wrote his scientific work about the catalysator and multiplies effect of innovation, of proprietary technology. For us, looks like completely clear that the future developments of an economic of a nation is related or are related on the inventions in the society, which means the state is responsible to make the right frame for innovators to have the possibility for research and developments in the field of proprietary technology. Secondly, Nordhaus. Nordhaus studies are related to the carbon tradings and to the carbon certificates, especially in the US and in Europe. And for sure, for the Nobel Prize Committee, was relevant to find a solution for at least one of the main questions of our environmental policy, and Nordhaus was able to give answers in his expertise. There are some new aspects, for example, that the carbon trading realities can be done with environmental cryptocurrencies, where the environmental cryptocurrencies also representing a speculation in a positive way of understanding. And finally, not surprisingly, it's also relevant to speak about the developments and the modern concept of micro and macroeconomy in regard to the development of economics in terms of provide the society of poverty. And Deaton was the one who was dedicating his whole life work how we can solve the question created by poverty. And his concept is, of course, also related how to solve poorness in the society in economic results and answers. So we have Deaton, we have Nordhaus, and we have Paul Romer, and we have more than 50 others which cannot give us any aspects to solve the existing problems in our generation right now. In the next part of the book, it's the fourth part, you can learn a lot about the financial crisis since the Middle Ages. Everybody is knowing the word Lombard credit. Lombard credit was coming from Lombardy, northern Italy, and the first banking crisis was in the Middle Ages, exactly in this part of the world. But more well known is the so-called tulip mania, 1637. Can you imagine if there was a flower, white, with white stripes inside? The speculation was reaching the worth of 2 houses in Antwerp. Craziness, like nowadays with many other speculations, especially in the field of cryptocurrencies. We all know that after the First World War in Germany and in Austria, we have a hyperinflation. This means that you have to pay for 1 kilo bread 23,000 Austrian shillings, per example, or you were receiving on Friday your salary and on Monday it was only worth half of it. And this singular experience after the First World War in Germany and in Austria might be happened in some years for many other countries based on the fiat money, which means printing money with enlargement of the quantity of money without enlargement of productivity and the service center in the economy. Everybody is knowing 1929, the Black Friday, which leads to the deep depression in the United States and the situation in Germany and in other countries. After the Second World War, there was a hyperinflation in Hungary again. And then we have decades of prosperity, and from 1996 till 2000 on the stock exchanges were developed a so-called dot-com bubble, which finally leads to a crash on the stock exchange in 2000. Only 8 years later, the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers in September was creating a financial crisis worldwide, and in addition, afterwards, a debt crisis in so many countries. And finally, Europe was paying the bill for United States. Here, it's one aspect which might be is catching your interest, that in 2001, the Austrian Chancellor, Dr. Wolfgang Schüssel, was launching the idea of an independent rating agency in Europe. Because in Europe, you have the domination of the big 3, Standard & Poor, Moody's, and Fitch. And they are working as a monopole, oligopole, and controlling the access to the capital market. And of course, in 2001, Dr. Schüssel from Austria was not successfully with an independent new sovereign European rating agency. And what happens in 2008, AIG daughter in London was giving a better rating to financial derivatives of Lehman Brothers, that a lot of European banks were buying these financial derivatives and losing tremendous financial funds, which were only be able to prepared by the government, and the government gave the security for so many banks in Europe. We have had the crisis in Greek, we have had the crisis in Spain, in Portugal, and it took many years from 2008 till 2016 for one or the other country to solve this starting financial crisis, which was turning in a debt crisis. So, and in 2020, we all know that the pandemic was creating several lockdowns in one or the other country too. In Austria, we have had right now the 4th lockdown, very strict. And on the beginning, the Johns Hopkins University were estimating might be 75 million citizens will die on COVID-19. At the moment, worldwide, we have had close to 6 million. But what we have for sure is so many companies, middle-sized companies and smaller-sized entities which went bankruptcy. In Austria, there was additional budget to solve the pandemic with 50 billion euros. And this is comparable relative to the inhabitants, tremendous big amount where a lot of companies were safe coming through the pandemic. But nobody was expecting a fourth lockdown, and we have it right now. And again, the impact is that a lot of companies has to close their doors, not only for the lockdown, forever. In Hungary, for example, you have no comparable support from the central government because they do not have the money. If you see the participation of the European budget, what is coming to Hungary, the European budget is always covering a period of 5 years. And after 1.5 years, all the money which was coming to Hungary went to the project which were applying for the money before the money were available. And then they're waiting 3 years, 4 years for the next money for the European Union. This is not fair if you take under consideration that many countries inside the European Union taking the money and the efforts from the funds of the European Union, but not holding the values of the European on the same level. For example, in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, I said nowadays, of course, Czech Republic and Slovakia, in Hungary, in Bulgaria, where you have corruption and where you do not have a constitutional law which is splitting between legislative body and executive body. And for me, it's unacceptable to take the advantages, but not be on the relevant value of understanding of this time period nowadays. And the impact is to the audience that they are laughing about the authorities in Brussels, and it's showing the weakness of the leaders in the European Union. But on that issue, I will come back later on. So the question marks before the pandemic mentioned by me before, of course, are in the field of environmental aspects, digitalization, automatization with artificial intelligence tools, with robots. And what was the great success of the 20th century? Of course, in Europe, to create the middle class. And of course, in Europe, to have more or less welfare state in function. But I can tell you exactly the great success of the second half of the 20th century, the middle class, is what we will lose in Europe in the next decade. And this does not mean that only the middle class will fall down in poorness. Also rich people will not change into middle class, will fall down also in poorness if we are not able to have a new policy and new programs and new answers of the existing questions. In part 5 and 6 of the book, we have to see on which different levels we are living and on which different levels, which kind of institutions are determining or at least influencing our life. Everybody from us is living regionally, local, in a nation, and supranational and international, and as a global citizen on Earth. But on each level, we have different key players. In economic terms, the focus is on two players. On the one side, the households, the private persons, and on the other side, the companies, of course. And if you go to all these levels, from local, regional, national, multinational, international, and global, you will see different key players. And the conclusion of these two parts of the books are that it's not understandable that organizations like Global 2000, Amnesty International, World Wildlife Fund are not accepted as sister organizations to the United Nations, because they will have enough funds and easier basics to do their worthful work for the society. And therefore, one aspect is to find a new structure for this kind of organization, especially if you're able to see with a lot of United Nations organizations where you have no real impact of their work. Austria and Vienna, especially as a neutral country in the world, is the headquarter of the Atomic Authority organization. It's the headquarter of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Of course, besides Geneva, the second place in Europe for the United Nations. Afterwards, in Addis Ababa, you have had the fourth headquarter of the United Nations besides New York. In these different levels, of course, you have strong, powerful organizations like the World Bank, like the Federal Reserve, like the European Central Bank, and like the MIGA, Multi-International Guarantee Agency, and a lot of others. One chapter in this part is dedicated to the independent sovereign rating agency in Europe. And you will be surprised that Eureka was able, in launching this year in April, the independent syndicate of an African rating agency. We were overwhelmed by the interests of different African nations. We have 55 nations belonging to the African Union, 10 of these 55 also belonging to the Arabic League. And we are working for all these countries to implement an independent sovereign rating agency. Of course, we are doing the same like Standard & Poor's, Moody's and Fitch, with bookkeeping standards, with research in the annual reports and many other documents. But if you see the sample of Standard & Poor's, which is doing the rating in Europe, 27 countries, plus Switzerland, Norway, and Great Britain after the Brexit, also showing the weakness of the European authorities. It was first of all the failure of the European Union that we are not able to give a perspective to the citizen of Great Britain to be part of the European Union. Now the European authorities are thinking, doesn't care. We have the Balkan candidates entering to the European Union, like Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Moldavia, and Montenegro, and others. This is completely not understandable what they have had in their mind to compare these countries, for sure, which needed to be supported to replace Great Britain in the European Union. These are the level of understandings on the top of the European Union. I'm knowing personally the EU Commissioner Dr. Gio Hahn very well. He's responsible for the budget, and he was, as a young man, working for our law office of Dr. Michael Graf in Vienna. I'm also knowing the European Parliament Vice President Dr. Ottmar Karas. His father-in-law is Dr. Kurt Waldheim, the previous UN Secretary General, and I'm ongoing in Brussels. And nice lady van der Leyen, but she has no power and she has no impact with the European Union to the international policy. In addition, the weakness of the European Union has to be seen and understood for all of us with the weakness of the United States. And the Biden administration, for sure, it's not representing to be the leader of the Western free world. Of course not. And if you see, China was replacing many years ago Japanese as the second biggest macroeconomy in the world. It's only a question of some few years that China is replacing the United States on the top of the most potential countries in the world. And this is not only the success of China, it is first of all the failure of the US administration and also the weakness of the European Union. We have had in the past the so-called transatlantic ties between Europe and the United States, which were cut during the Trump administration and for sure will not be reinforced under the Biden administration. Question marks over question marks, but there are for sure solutions and answers available. Coming back to the rating agency, where the market is dominated by Standard & Poor, Fitch and Moody's, we are granting to the nations, and each nation, the 30 leading companies, 3 additional fields where they can have a better scoring. First of all, the environmental balance, how the company or the nation is dealing with their resource allocation, for example. Then the transparency indicator, a lot of money, US aid, it's going to Africa. And finally, you have a garage with a sign, and this was the proprietary technology project. But many countries and many companies want to have access to the programs and want to show to the audience what they have done with the money and what were they able to create with these funds. And this is valued by our transparency indicator. Then the innovation hub of a company, of a nation. I was in South Africa on the University of Pretoria, have done there a speech to PhD candidates about proprietary technology. Can you imagine? There's an innovation hub of 30,000 inventions in South Africa. And I was announced to make a portfolio of 5 of them for, at that time, Daimler Chrysler company. So the natural resources, the human resources, the wonderful nature in Africa, it's showing me that the real new world, if you want to find it, you will find it in Africa and not any longer in the United States, or for sure not on the old continent, Europe. During the 70s, where the book mentioned on the beginning, Limit of Growth by Meadows in Club of Rome, there was a new word creation, Eurosclerose. And we are still living now in an Eurosclerose scenario in Europe. And this has an impact of the citizen and the society in Europe. Finally, in the rating agency, you have the social corporate responsibility as an indicator to see that it's relevant how the company is dealing with their clients or the employer with the employees. And so you have the procedure of collecting data, selecting data, add these new data in these three fields to the selected data, and then you have to value the data. And for this, you need benchmarks. Everything is done and will be done with regional analytic offices of ARA, where we have in each country our ARA, African Rating Agency team, indifferent to Standard & Poor in Europe, where for finishing the sentence, for 30 countries, they only have 7 branch offices in Europe. So this was a sidestep to practical understanding what can be the impact of a book, that you have the know-how, the scientific approach, and then the manpower to transfer your knowledge in economic terms and real projects. If you have still the narrative in your mind, you throw a stone into the lake and you have concentric circles, and we are going from the circles to the inner circles like a deduction. Then you will be able, in the 7th part of the book, to speak about the mindset. Everybody from us was hearing the politicians saying this is the biggest crisis since 1954 and they're printing money and so on. But never the time they were able to see that the mindset of the generation nowadays, it's completely different to the mindset of the generation after the Second World War. Your grandparents, parents were living at that time in the intention to have a little apartment, to have a car, to be mobile, to have the mobility which is needed. Once per year, you will go to a nice journey on the Middle Sea. And first of all, you want to give your children a better life via education. This was the concept, and the people were modest and satisfied. Nowadays, in German, you will say you have the Ich AG. You totally have to focus on yourself. You have the benchmark between work-life balance. And if the work-life balance not okay, you will ask yourself for what you are available on Friday afternoon, where you have your free day and other people are going on the beach or going to their friends or having fun and free time. And if someone will give an offer for one employee 500 euros more, and you were working 5-7 years in this company, educated from this company, you will leave the company because doesn't care. There is no ties between you and the employer. I can tell you, I'm coming from an old business family, and during the 60s, if you see how my grandfather, president of the Chamber of Commerce and International Forwarder, was living as a patriarch and taking care of his staff, of the family members of his staff, and all these realities, there was a complete different scenario. And even in the time of my father, you can find a different scenario. But nowadays, the Ich AG, AG means shareholder company, I am, and only I am counting. So this is not in the mind of the politicians, that the debts which now are created by printing money should be financed and paid back by this generation. and the next generation. And if you ask one Minister of Finance, what is a seigniorage capital, then he has a question mark, because he's not knowing what is the meaning. I will tell you in some minutes. I only want to say another failure is that we are all thinking it's not needed that a Minister of Finance has a know-how about economics, because he has his staff, he has his advisor. But we are all knowing, if you have no idea, no clue about what is your responsibility, then you will have the wrong questions. And with this kind of advisor, he will receive the answers, the correct answer, but the correct answer of a wrong question. And so we are facing all these problems in Europe and in other parts of the world on different reasons, of course, but this is one reason of it. And so let's coming back to the seigniorage capital. If you are able to see the passiva of the balance sheet of the European Central Bank before the Lehman Brothers crisis in 2008, it was around 2 trillion. Before the pandemic, the passiva was around 4.7 trillion passiva, which means how much money you have had at that time in the markets of the European Union. And from the 27, 18 belonging to the Eurozone, as we are all knowing. So during the pandemic, this amount was increasing from 247 trillions to 72 trillions. And now you can estimate at what time our financial system will reach a collapse, because you have to compare this money amount with the gross national product accumulated of all countries which are belonging to the Eurozone. And this amount is, what do you think? Totally, I will tell you, 10 trillions. So we have 72 and 10 trillions. And if this policy is going on, then you will have by the end of next year 10 to 10 trillions, and then the crash will come. And the seigniorage capital is showing you these facts. But if you're not knowing what is a seigniorage capital, you will never see the upcoming problems for the Eurozone in the world. Please remind that Christine Lagarde was saying on the beginning of the crisis, we will hold the inflation rate at 2.3, 2.5%. Nobody's crying nowadays. In Germany, during my book launching in Frankfurt, the Minister of Finance was telling to the audience about the key economic figures and performance indicators in Germany. And he said, in Germany, we have right now 4.7% inflation rate. Nobody has a problem with it because nobody is understanding it. And in the United States, what we have had 2 weeks ago, inflation rate, 6.3%. So it's not unrealistic about what we are now speaking and thinking, that this singular appearance of a hyperinflation after the First World War in Germany and in Austria, and after the Second World War in Hungary, might be, will be a common understanding for many countries on the world, especially in Europe and United States. China will see, wait and laugh behind the curtain. So in this part about social, cultural and moral, philosophical understandings, around 70 pages I wrote in the book. This is this one. I will show you this one here. 504 pages, as I said. And what I want to say is in this chapter, part of the book about the social, cultural, and moral philosophical patterns, I want to speak about two things. First of all, as I was in far Middle East, I was really interested in to learn about the Islamic world, the difference between Shia and Sunnis and Alawites and so many different aspects, to get familiar about the Sharia. And on that basis, please allow me to speak some few sentences about the Roman Catholic Church. In Austria, in each little village, you have a church. And the structure of the society there is the mayor, then you have the priest, then you have a free fire worker team, and then you have a free music chapel, and then you have your football team. And this you can find everywhere. Nowadays, you still have your football team, you have your mayor, you have your free fire worker team, but you need 5-6 regions with churches where you can find one priest serving to the regions there. In the theory, in the past of the Roman Holy Empire, about the two-sword theory, you have to understand one sword is the Pope for the liturgy, for the spiritual understanding on earth, and the other sword was in the hand of the emperor of Austrian-Hungary. So in Austria, you have such realities. If you go to Vienna, to the St. Stephan's Dome, and I can tell you, the church still have a lot of money. They have had last year an advertising from the roof, from the top to the town, from H&M. Congratulations, really nice. This is the way how I have to understand a spiritual place, to see the advertising of H&M in front of the St. Stephan's Dome. It's showing me that their cultural, social, moral, philosophical patterns are not in the right dimensions in our society. In 1962, Pope Johannes XXIII was starting the Second Vatican Concile to open the church very successfully. We have had, by the end of the 16th, with the guitar, the priest in front of the altar and singing, hey, hey, man, and such other things. It's really the liturgy and the mythology and the spiritual understanding for what we are all searching for in our life. Clearly, it's not. And the value of the church nowadays, it's not any longer existing. And this is giving a place to Scientologists and to other realities who are founding so-called churches in our society. This is a nightmare for me. And for me, it's also a nightmare that the key factor of our society, the family, not any longer in Europe having the worth which has it generations before. And this is showing me that the future developments for sure will not go in the right directions. In Europe, it's understandable that a woman want to have their own funds, want to have their own profession, and they will have for sure totally my support, like my wife, for example. But on the other side, the men were not able to show the woman the importance to be the heart of the family and the value to be a mother for the children. This not having any longer the value in the Western world. Therefore, till 30 years, no child's acceptable. With 30 years, at least one child should be to create a family and then again focus on the career. And in the meanwhile, the child is sent to the school and will be educated by the teacher. And how looks like with the teacher nowadays in the primary school, in the secondary school, in the high school? Sorry to say, my teacher, and I'm coming for sure from a real good education system, I can tell you, who want to be a teacher, want to have 2 summer months free and half day free after doing the education of the children in the primary, secondary, or in the high school. So this not for sure the person who should educate my children, for sure not. Of course, I'm now speaking, let's say, radical about the things which happened in our society, but I only want to bring the spotlight what we really have and on what we have to work to have, again, the importance of the worth of family in our society as the key factor, as the genetic code of the development of our society. So on the other side, I want to say that our society is also a fatigue society, and parallel an arousal society. We have had, can you imagine, in Austria, advertising to buy bread. Can you imagine? Over generations, centuries, bread and water was a key element for the society. Now you have to make advertising to buy bread in our society. Now, on the other side, milk was one of the primary things which we need to eat, to drink, like corn. But it has to be now lactose-free and gluten-free. Why? Because the overproduction and the frame to reach overproduction, it's creating not natural resources for us, and to drink milk, to take a corn, has an impact of us in health terms. Horrible. Again, a nightmare about we have to think and what we have to solve. And this is not new. So many aspects. We are aware about the Paris climate targets, yes, to solve the environmental impact to our society. But in 1992, you have the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development as the Agenda 21. We all knowing it, but we are doing nothing. That's the case. And then, of course, now a wonderful chapter has to be opened. The conspiracy theories which are accompanying us, especially during the period of pandemic. How stupid we are in common. And finally, we are able to check out the secret society of the Bilderberger or the Davos Economic Forum or Soros want to create a world central government to control everything. If I'm able to see the Yellow Jacket movement in Paris before the pandemic, because the people are working 2 jobs and not able to serve their life, to pay their apartment, to have enough funds for education, and to go to the university, and at least 1 or 2 times per month with friends to drink something in a pub. It's not possible. And then we are surprised that the people are going to the street with yellow jackets and not accepting that most of us living under not correct circumstances, and few of us are having more money than ever before. What is the background scenario for that? I will tell you. Because the financial and capital market sector, it's 20 times bigger than the real production and service center. It's like in the pandemic. the world economic scenario, it's living in such realities, and most of the people are living in a digital world where 30 Facebook friends more counting than one real friend. Regarding a world central government, I want to remind you on Thomas More's, on his book Utopia. How old it is, I will tell you. 505 years, written in the early 16th century. And at that time it was utopia, and now it's a utopia because finally the World Economic Forum in Davos, Bilderberger, Soros and others have children, have a family, and they want to live in a world where all the people are on the street, and instability, it's the key factor of the growing issues of our society. For sure not. For sure not. About this and many other aspects we can speak later on as well. The deduction now, it's coming to the new economy 3.0. And Ludwig Wittgenstein, of course, it's well known for all of us, which great characters we have had in the human society. Really, I'm thinking now on Baruch T. Spinoza, who was writing the book about ethics and his feeling of the worth of living a life dedicated to others and orientated in ethics, were creating the misunderstanding that he's believing on a different kind of God. And the impact for him was, as a Jew, to be excluded in the society of the Jews, which means you cannot survive at that time. And he was serving his life to work in an optical shop to prepare glass for spectacles. Baruch T. Spinoza, ethics. But Ludwig Wittgenstein was coming from the most richest families in Austria, like ThyssenKrupp in Germany. And he gave all his fortune away and was acting as a teacher in a primary school in Great Britain, as we know. And I was structuring the new economy 3.0 in the way how he was structuring his Tractatus. So this means that I'm starting with postulates, then I have supporting lines categorized as auxiliary sentences, I have axioms, I have Platzer-Rothschild theorems, totally 12. And first of all, it's easy to criticize, it's easy to describe, it's easy to have an understanding afterwards what happened before. But in this book, we have 68 advices to the decision makers on Earth, what they have to do and what they should do. So it's now 1 hour, 50 minutes. Let's coming to the last part of the book. It's here I was able to make future research and to be connected to the book. The last part of the book, it's called Post-Sustainability Macroeconomics. Everybody from us, it's knowing how future research were starting by people in the field of literature, like Jules Verne. He wrote in 1864 the well-known book Voyage au centre de la Terre. Some years later, 9 years exactly, in 1873, he wrote the book 80 Days Around the World. All the time, creative, intellectual people were thinking about the future. I have had the honor knowing John Nesbitt personally, He wrote the book in 1982, Megatrends Asia, where he was able in 1982 to see that China will replace Japanese and finally will replace the United States as the leader of the free world. Nowadays, we are knowing Elon Musk with his SpaceX program and settlements on Mars, or his Hyperloop transportation technologies together with Dirk Alborn, how we can be faster in our logistics. And we all have sometimes the feeling this is an extraterrestrial element in our society, the artificial intelligence, but it is not. Everything is done by ourselves, and everything can be controlled by ourselves. The future, it's what we are intending to do. And the main questions were all the time the same: where we live, how we live, with whom we will live, in which way. And so new mega trends are not so far from old mega trends. We have to build robust bridges to the future. We still have to hold power of center in regard of economic political things. We have to solve the anti-aging understandings in our life. There was a famous cardinal where the Roman Catholic Church still was relevant. It was Dr. König, and his assistant was the university professor Huber. And he told us, I have to tell you, all of us will reach the circumstances of life in the age of 40, like all generations before. But what is different? We will remain on these circumstances the next 30 years. That's interesting. And so a positive aspect of anti-aging understandings in our society. And of course, finally, we have to catch the harmony between economy and ecology. And I'm finishing my overview in the intention to remind all of us that, again, one Austrian in the early 80s was able to see that this is possible, the harmonization between economy and ecology. And he was founding the so-called Eco-Social Forum, which was turned later on to the Marshall platform in connection to the Great Marshall Plan after the Second World War. It was the Vice Chancellor, Master Engineer Yoshi Riegler, who was a visionaire at that time, but he was in a coalition with a banker, Franz Franitzky, who was present in the media, and he was finally not able to launch his understandings about eco-social forum based on the Christian moral theory, where we are nowadays orientated in the Paris Treaty, which was influenced by him and his knowledge more than one decade before, but he was starting to work on that issues in 1987. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we should keep in our mind, and we are knowing it all together, the future depends on us. We have to learn from the history to understand the present realities, and we should accept and understand that we are crucial for the future. Let's ask you how you were living today your bathroom, how you were living today your breakfast table, and how you were living your bed. Everything in good conditions, hopefully. Then you are part of the right movements, that we are responsible what happened in the future, And it is not an explanation to think it's an extraterritorium impact on us. Nothing. It's everything done by us and created by us. And finally, I want to tell you, I'm a completely optimist. I'm able to see that the society always is able to solve their problems. It's oftentimes a clash between crisis and realities, but human beings always learning and always find, like water, a way through all these realities. And in this way, I want to say thank you to be patient, to be concentrated and listening what I want to tell you as an overview. In detail, of course, it's much more interesting, but we have 10 minutes where one or the other question can be answered by me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for this enlightenment about the economics of this new generation century. So now we would like to open it for questions, and we are opening for questions for anyone who would like to participate in the question session. So we have Abdul Ghani. You can start if you like.
Hello, hello, Professor. Thank you so much for the interesting information and the sequence, the historical sequence you used at the very beginning that helps someone like me who is not interested or who doesn't have a discipline like this. I'm not interested in such a discipline. It's not my own, but you make me follow it in a very interesting way. My question is concerning the financial crisis and the expectation of it. When England or Britain would like to leave the UE or the EU, sorry, European Union, they expected that there will be some disasters, economic disasters, or for example, it will be very bad. But I think when it left it, it's not as they expected, especially when we have a pandemic. You know, it should be worse, much worse. You know, so who expects such expectations? They are academics, experts, and some famous scientists in the world, but sometimes their expectations are not or don't come true. So what I said now is right, that Europe is not affected such way. And another question, but I'd like you to excuse me concerning my question, because I'd like to ask it for my own self. Can I guess that there is a ghost having a remote control controlling the economy all over the world? Sometimes we find crisis, financial crisis, and it is solved in a certain way and so on. But I'm not. It's not my own discipline, so excuse me if I have some wrong information. Thank you so much.
Abdel Ghani, thank you for your two questions. First of all, I want to express my clear understanding. It's a tragedy for Europe that we lost Great Britain. And as I said in my statement, first of all, the failure was on the side of the European Union. We were, and this is also a part of the answer to your second question, we were all waiting on the results, what finally the majority will do in regard of participation in the European Union. And then we were surprised that with fake news and with wrong promises and with deducted misleading arguments, the majority, especially on the countryside, were voting for the Brexit against the European Union. And where was the active element of the European Union? If I'm commissioner in the European Union, I will take a flight, the train, to go to Great Britain, to speak with the people, to explain. I will have a video, I will have advertising, I will show to the people where are the advantages of the European Union, what was the great success of the European Union. Hundreds of years, I can tell you, and you are knowing it, the Britons were killing the French people were killing the Britons. Both of them were killing the Germans were killing the Russians were fighting against the Austrians and Germans. The European Union is first of all a great freedom progress inside Europe. And then we were developing economic programs and other aspects. And that was sold for fake news. And it is, of course, a fake news if we have the understanding there is a central moment conducting the financial crisis. I will tell you the truth is that the passive on the people and on the decision makers, it's creating crisis. That we are able, it's like a dancing on the volcano. We are able to see the next eruption will come, but we do nothing against it. And then we ask from where this energy, in this case, negative energy, it's coming from. Of course, sometimes there are speculation. Sometimes there's a policy which will be fulfilled successfully for some of the key players. But in general terms, I have to tell you, there's no conspiracy theory. There is no global concept from some few against all others. There's only a great passive behavior from the people who has to make the right decisions for us.
Yeah, thank you so much for the answer. And I noticed that the one who was affected by such leaving is England itself. When they have a crisis concerning the drivers of the
Trucks.
Yeah, trucks. They needed now to search for people from outside, from abroad. Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you.
With pleasure.
Yeah, Mohammed, you can ask the question.
Thank you, Dr. Riyad. Thank you, Professor. It has been a pleasure to join you in this lecture. I would like to ask you about, after economic crisis, usually we can have like an era of corruption. My question is, because I'm in Libya and we are living in the era after the war. So my question is, how can we make function of the corporate governance in order to supporting credibility and transparency for the economic, from my specialist, I'm especially in commercial law in Libya. So I'm trying to write about how can we make function of commercial law in order to supporting the credibility and transparency in order to supporting the corporate governance for the economy after the war, of course. Thank you.
Relevant question. First of all, I have to say that the Americans and Europeans are not able to see that it is needed an adaptation of principles in the field of democracy. We always try to export our democracy to countries where the social cultural patterns and the history and their orientation completely different. And we have to anticipate that if we want to transfer our principles with no adaptation to these different societies, will never work. we cannot bring democracy to Afghanistan in this way. We cannot bring as US democracy to Iraq in that way. We have to see in the north, there's a Kurdish society. In the middle, you have the Sunnis. In the south, you have the Shias. And all of them have a different orientation. And first of all, they are orientated not in borders. They are orientated in their tribes. They are orientated in their family leaders. And they have a completely different understanding in so many aspects. But we do copy and paste. Friedman wrote the constitutional law for Iraq. And after the first assembling and free election in 2004 and 2005, what was the first impact? In the constitutional law of Iraq, all chapters granting support to the women were cancelled, because this kind of society are living on different ideals. I have had the honor to work for the Kissinger Association, and I'm knowing Henry Kissinger personally. And he told me to understand the different realities in so many countries, like your country, Libya, and other countries, is to see in which time they are living. Let's say US is living in 2021. Then Great Britain is living in 2018, Germany in 2015, Austria in 2010. But Turkey, for example, in my understanding, it's living in a different time period. And this is not valuing from my side, because in Europe, if I'm speaking about Western Europe and Eastern Europe, for you it's different. I want to tell you, the first understanding is I'm valuing. Yes, Western Europe, it's more than Eastern Europe, but it's only to have a regional focus that we are knowing about what we are speaking, and to compare these different societies and the implementation of a civil society. It's the easiest way to understand that Turkey, it's living in the year, I'm not telling, but because the impact to say something wrong about Turkey can you catch you everywhere. Yes, but on the other side, you see the policy and the weakness, the transatlantic ties between Europe and United States. Turkey, it's a NATO partner. On the one side, in Syria, were the Kurdish people fighting for freedom. Turkey, it's against the Kurdish people because on their own problem inside Turkey in northern Iraq. So supporting in this way the administration of the establishment. And on the other side, in conflict to Russia, to have border control, they have common forces with Russia as a NATO partner. What I want to say is that the political reality is always completely different after the realities in a theoretical understanding. And if you asking me how to anticipate the mechanism after a war scenario in your country, then again, you will be able to see that the world is not fair, and the world is not a fair place. And a war only means in some parts of the world that the power is changing from one group to another group, but the other group, it's working on the same principles as the reason to start a war against the old group of power. General speaking, and so the impact of a war scenario in many places of the world is that only the center of power it's moving, but the frame for the society is not changing. And exactly this should be the support of the European Union to strengthen the structure of associations inside the country who are having the right targets, but not the tools to work for the targets and to be protected in the period working for this kind of targets, because they are always under danger. And finally, the new authorities in conflict to such organizations are having the power to give the penalties to stop their worthful work for better society, for the implementation of a civil society. And of course, as you said, the constitutional law and the law frame, at least it's the starting point where the executive has to be obliged on the law system. The legislative has the power to judge wrong directions theoretically, because the realities are different. And there are only some few samples in the world where after a war conflict, immediately positive realities were appearing into the communities of nations in the world. In reality, it takes many generations that really something is changing. And therefore, last aspect, I have great respect for the migration of people from other countries, because my understanding is that most of the people who try to come to Europe, they are ambitious. They want to have a better life for themselves and for their family, and not to take the welfare state issues to them. They want to live in freedom, they want to work, they want to develop something, and they want to protect their family. So your answer in general terms, your question in general terms cannot be answered. But in detail, for sure, on each question you have an answer, and you will be able to see the problems which you are facing. And for each problem you need a portfolio of activities to undermine, finally to reach a common target.
Thank you, Professor. This is covering my question and even more. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Professor. If Ilyas, maybe he would like to ask a question. Ilyas, maybe you introduce yourself and then you can ask the question.
We cannot hear him. He is off record.
Yeah, you are muted. Yeah, now, okay.
Thank you. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Elias.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Dr. Iyad. Thank you, Professor, for this comprehensive introduction. And I have a comment, if you don't mind, please. I think regarding leaving the European Union, regarding the UK leaving the European Union, I think leaving the decision to the British people to decide was not a wise political decision through a referendum, I mean, because the ordinary British, as you said, in the countryside, doesn't know what are the benefits of joining the EU to the UK. So that was wrong from the political level side of the United Kingdom. Regarding the EU example, how countries, our economies can complement one another, I think this is a great idea for to be duplicated in the case of the Palestinian-Israeli issues, economic issues, where both economies do not really compete with one another, but they complement one another. I think it is really worth studying how both economies, the Palestinian and Israeli, can complement one another and contribute to the benefit of both sides and for the region as well. And ultimately, that contributes to bringing both people together as well. Thank you again, and these were my two comments.
Elias, I want to tell you that I was in Jordania in refugee camps where I saw the value. I saw thousands of tents, and then I saw a flag about the Palestinian understanding. And I have to tell you, it's really makes each person with feelings and with a right understanding said what you are facing there. And it is explaining that in one tent might be 3 generations are living. Grandfather lost his house, father never has had a job, and the son has no education. And exactly on that point, for the son, political activities might be starting against themselves and against human beings. What I want to say is that we always have to see the implication of something. Finally, we only judging what happens, but we have to see from where it's coming from. And it has to be solved, this entire problem between Palestine and Israel, for sure, and Europe again only looking and doing nothing of importance. It's washing the eyes and nothing else. And as long as we do not have a fair harmonization in this part of the world, we will still have realities which we do not want to have to nobody on both sides, of course. And I can say that I have the honor to be in contact to Muslim people, to Jewish people, to Christian people, like your studies also covering all these aspects, finally to have a conclusion how we are able to make this world for a better place. We are always judging on associations to words or to situations and not on fundamental data. Why? It's coming in my mind, if I'm speaking about make the world a better place, and in the second we are all thinking unrealistic. Or we are thinking it's like a wish from contest to be Miss Universe. If she's asked, what is your greatest wish? And she will say, world peace. But finally, we have to work in this direction because it is crucial, and it's unacceptable that human beings with the same worth have so different lives. And everything, we cannot change the world everywhere, but we can change our world. And where I am touched by realities on my business trips, on my journeys, on my obligations to my family, to my staff, to people who are counting on me. If I'm doing this right, then it is just a little bit to make the world for a better place. And this is the reality for all of us. And Elias, thank you for your comments. And hopefully I'm not touching feelings in the wrong way. This is where we can discuss many hours, and finally we have no conclusion, but it's not needed. We have to accept each other in our understanding, and we have to see what in any case, without misunderstandings, has to be solved, that this world it's a better place for each human being, because each human being has the same worth, but not living in the same standards.
Thank you. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you very
So,
much.
gentlemen and ladies, surprisingly, really, I have a second conference today in Accra. And Dr. Dowdy is informed about it, and that I have the opportunity and the pleasure to speak with you. I gave a video message 2 days before to the audience, but I have promised to them that I will participate in real to the conference in Accra, which is launched by my ARA team and the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Africa and Asia. And I want to write on the group my email account. If there are further informations or needed details, please feel yourself free to write to me. And I'm looking forward on the next invitation by Dr. Daudi. And again, thank you for the possibility to be with you and your PhD candidates. For sure, it's always inspiring for me to have the chance to be in interaction with all of you. And I hope we see us soon again. This year, realistic speaking, not. And therefore, I would like to express my thoughts for all of you to have a better 2022 and more than this, the end of the pandemic, or at least no additional lockdown, because as I said at the beginning, the most important things are the economic terms, and the pandemic and the lockdowns are destroying our economic frame. And so prosperity to all of you. And thank you again for listening. Thank you, Liat, for the opportunity, and looking forward to see you all again in good conditions.
That's excellent, Professor. Thank you so much. So if anyone does, I don't know if anyone has do you have any time yet, or that's it, Professor? What?
I have now to leave with your permission, and okay. I will write my email, my personal email account on the WhatsApp group, and I'm really looking forward to be again together with all of you. And therefore, with your permission, I will say goodbye and all the best for the next upcoming year.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Thank you very much. And we are very happy that you made it and gave us the lecture. We're all delighted. And we would love that to have you another time in another session as well. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone. And we will go to a break for 10 minutes, and then we come back with applause for Professor Bullet. And here is it. Thank you very much. So after
Dr. Iyad, your microphone is muted. We can't hear you.
I am sorry. Now I am back online, right? It's working. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yeah, okay.
Let's see. Okay. So thank you very much for being here. Actually, let's go do a break, and we can come after. How long you want? 10 minutes is good, or 15 minutes? Like at 5? I think at 5 is good. So I'll give you a break, 15 minutes. What we are going to discuss after that is, I don't know, someone is doing, yeah, that's excellent. So we'll take 15 years back at, and we'll talk about how we can apply for our MENA PhD program. And then we can also open discussion for everyone. So not just to know who we are and, to open the views. So we'll see you at 5.